Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. This video is going to focus on AMD as there's actually a lot of news occurring in the land of the Red at the moment. I want to begin by discussing Zen 4. Despite the fact that the Ryzen 5000 series, based of course on the Zen 3 processor architecture, has only been available for just a few days now, we are already starting to hear news for what will follow. Now, it's interesting because this information does primarily focus on the server market, but it also has very interesting ramifications for desktop as well. So what am I talking about? Well, it all comes down to Genoa, which is the next generation of EPYC processor. Well, technically it's the next generation of server processor, because as of the time I'm recording this, we have yet to see Milan become available. So it goes Rome, Milan, and then Genoa. Milan keeps to the same format in terms of the number of cores as Rome. We have 64 cores, 128 threads, and those CPUs are available in dual socket configurations, but Genoa, according to Executable Fix on Twitter, will see this number increase to 96 CPU cores, as well as adopt DDR5 memory and also PCIe 5 as well. Honestly, this information perfectly matches one of my earlier leaks. One of the reasons that AMD were keeping to 64 cores with Milan was because of memory bandwidth. Basically, you need to, of course, feed all of those processor cores to take full advantage of them. And this was, again, according to my information for the desktop for Zen 3, the reason that AMD decided to stick to 16 cores for the Zen 3 processors. Well, there was that and the fact that AMD did not feel that they need to increase the core count for mainstream because, quite honestly, Intel were just not putting enough pressure on them. 96 cores, though, for the next generation has some interesting questions, like how will the layout of the CCD/CCX change, and will we see other chips on the CPU core, so on the CPU? There have been some leaks and speculation that we will see, let's say something like HBM2 on there, but at the end of the day, a lot of that is just speculation for now. The Zen 4 processor architecture, though, will not be the next successor to desktop. What we do understand is that between Zen 3 and Zen 4 there will be a refresh, which is known as Warhol. My sources have already confirmed that this is indeed the case, and then subsequently we've seen some roadmaps. The questions at the moment is how all of this fits in with the AM4 and AM5 platforms. We really don't know how that will work. If I had to guess, and it is based upon a guess at this point, AM4 will stick around and Warhol will simply be for X570 boards or something like that. But again, it is possible that it will be on AM5. And we do know that AM5 will be utilising DDR5, obviously much higher memory bandwidth there, and also the jump to PCIe 5 as well. Actually, that's not 100% true. There is another question as well for Warhol, and that is how exactly it changes in terms of the actual CPU cores. Are there differences in IPC or CPU architecture? Is it simply going to be higher clock frequencies, maybe additional features? Well, as always, all we can do is wait and see. Speaking of waiting and seeing, the RX 6800 has been hotly anticipated. It marks the first high-end cards from AMD for a long time. I mean, yes, we've had the Radeon 7, which was really released, to be honest with you, according to my sources at AMD anyway, as a kind of, hey, remember us in the high-end space? And we also have had the Vega 56 and 64 cards, which I think did fairly well, but in terms of performance versus and power consumption, NVIDIA definitely were ahead in Pascal, and obviously the 64s was just not as fast as the GTX 1080 Ti. But this situation seems very different with RDNA 2. The architecture is extremely scalable. And we actually have some benchmarks of the RX 6800 as well as some clock frequencies. CapFrameX on Twitter has confirmed that we will see clock frequencies over 2500 megahertz for overclocking. This perfectly matches my earlier reports when I was first leaking all of the details of RDNA 2 that Navi 21 as well as other silicon actually clocks really high. And naturally this scales even better because of the Infinity Fabric architecture on the chip, the Infinity Cache architecture on the chip. It will be extremely interesting to see what happens if you get really lucky in the silicon lottery, especially for like cherry-picked cards. Like, what is the upper limit of what this silicon is capable of? And I suspect that for hardcore overclockers, it's going to be a lot of fun to really try these things out and really see what the cards are actually capable of. But we also have some benchmarks as well. And this is thanks to Basemark. This benchmark is not as popular as something like Firestrike or Ashes of the Singularity or any other well-used benchmark that review sites use. One of the reasons behind that, quite frankly, is that the benchmark itself is fairly short. So oftentimes the clock frequency of the GPU could just go all of the way up, and it doesn't do such a good job in terms of consistency because of the benchmark runs are not as long and that type of thing. But it does give us some indication that these cards indeed will outperform NVIDIA's RTX 3070. Looking at the scores, the 6800 is between 7-8ish% faster than the 3070 and outperforms the 2080 Ti by 4ish%. However, different APIs scale differently on either GPU. Well, actually, NVIDIA's Ampere as well as Turing both score a little differently based upon their APIs as well. Now, it is worth noting that the MSRP of the RX 6800 is a little more expensive than the RTX 3070. You're looking at $80 more for the 6800, which means that technically speaking, AMD do not actually have a direct price competitor to the 3070 as of the time I'm recording this, and you could also look at it that NVIDIA doesn't have a direct competitor to the 6800 because the 3080 is obviously more expensive, and yeah, it becomes quite interesting. This will definitely start filling out as both companies add more cards to their repertoire, and it's clear that NVIDIA are being forced to react. The very fact of the matter is that NVIDIA at the very beginning obviously wanted to release cards with 8 and 10 gigabytes of memory, which honestly, from my testing so far, I've not run into any issues with the games that I've been trying, but from a friendliness to customers perspective, it's hard to argue that more RAM equal bad. So the fact is, AMD are going to make a lot of it. Well, they're just going to make a really big deal of the higher amount of VRAM on their GPUs. The rumor is as well that the 6700 series is going to feature 12 gigabytes of memory. So the 6700 series is going to actually have more memory than the RTX 3080. But as I reported a few days ago, it's kind of weird because NVIDIA seem to be releasing even the lower end SKUs with more RAM. There's reports of like the 3060 series is going to have up to 12 gigabytes of memory, which is going to lead to a lot of interesting, questions, I suspect, for customers. But of course, this is always just how the GPU market goes. I'll also add in a small thing as well for the RX 6800 and 6800 XT that I'm hearing from different people, and that is that the 6800 is noisier than the 6800 XT. Furthermore, to add yet more to the ray tracing information that I put out yesterday, yes, it seems that the ray tracing performance is definitely not on par with NVIDIA's. Now, this may or may not be a big deal to you, but what's interesting is that a couple of people now have told me that the performance per watt seems to change considerably when hardware-based ray tracing on AMD's cards are enabled. I would encourage, of course, for you just to wait until the reviews before you make a decision, because at the end of the day, until reviews come out, it's very hard to make a recommendation for either Nvidia or AMD. But I personally feel it's great that we actually have competition. With all of that said though, hopefully you have enjoyed the video, the normal stuff if you did. Like, share, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.